In skeletal muscles, there's an extensive network of blood vessels that provides a high amount of nutrients and oxygen to skeletal muscles, which have high metabolic needs. Skeletal muscle fatigue is a symptom that reduces the ability of your muscles to perform over time. It's linked with exhaustion, often following strenuous activity or exercise. When you experience fatigue, your muscle movement decreases, causing you to feel weaker, and there's a buildup of lactic acid in these muscles. Skeletal muscles play an important role in thermal regulation as they provide reflexive movement to make you stay warm. The body has thermal receptors which can sense a drop in temperature, so the body shivers, causing you to gain heat. To get the skeletal muscle to perform to a stimulus and a need to move, a change in environment is noticed, which causes a neuron response to travel along a sensory nerve to the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and spine. It travels through this on a relay neuron, where it diffuses across a synapse to the motor neuron, which delivers the message to the skeletal muscle, which performs a response of contraction. Now on to muscle roles of muscles. In the body there are four main muscular functional groups, which include the prime movers being agonists. These muscles carry the most workload as they are responsible for movement. The agonist in the movement is the muscle, which provides the big force to complete movement. Because of this, agonists are known as the prime movers. In the bicep curl, which produces flexion at the elbow, the bicep muscle is the agonist. Agonists are very important in sport as they enable movement to participate. For example, in the bicep curl, the agonist will allow movement for it to contract and therefore a person to throw a shot put, for example. The next major role is the antagonist. This creates resistance and prevents overshoot. Antagonist and agonist muscles tend to occur in pairs called antagonistic pairs. One muscle contracts as the other relaxes. An example of an antagonistic pair is the biceps and triceps. To contract, the triceps relaxes while the biceps contracts to lift the arm. There are over 600 muscles making up the human body, and most of these work in antagonistic pairs. As the biceps contract, the triceps, which is the antagonist, will relax, and that will cause movement around the biceps. And a sporting example of this is the backhand in tennis. The next role is synergists. These help the prime movers and add force and stability. The synergist in a movement is the muscle that stabilizes a joint around where movement is occurring. Therefore, it helps the agonist function effectively. Synergist muscles also help to create the movement. This is important in sport as it assists movement, which is essential to perform activities such as the use of quadriceps in football. The fixator in a movement is the muscle or muscles which stabilizes the origin of the agonist and the joint that the origin moves over in order to assist the agonist function most effectively. In the bicep curl, this would be the rotator cuff muscles, the guardians of the shoulder joint. The biceps and your back muscles work together during a pull-up to pull your body to the bar. Bones are attached to skeletal muscles on each end by tendons. The origin is the attachment, which is fixed while the insertion moves with contraction. The action of a muscle can be described relative to the joint or the body part moved. A tendon is a tough band of fibrous connective tissue which usually connects muscle to bone and is capable of withstanding tension. Where it attaches is the origin. In sport, the origin is important as it attaches the bone to the muscle, which therefore allows movement, which is important in all sports from swimming to netball. The term muscle insertion refers to a certain point of a bone where a certain muscle, as well as its force during contraction, inserts. The muscle inserts in most cases via a tendon onto the bone. The muscular insertion should not be confused with the muscle origin. This again is important in sport as it allows movement of muscle and therefore bone. Skeletal muscles are attached to bones on both ends by tendons. The origin is the fixed attachment, while the insertion moves when there is a contraction. The action or particular movement of a muscle can be described relative to the joint or the body part moved. Feel free to pause here and have a look, as here are two label diagrams of skeletal muscles, one of facing forward and one facing back. Now going on to muscles around joints, I'll go through one in each of these tables, but feel free to pause and read. So for the medial deltoid, the origin originates from part of the clavicle as well as the spine and acromion process of the scapula. The insertion inserts into the deltoid tuberosity on the humerus. The antagonist is the latissimus dorsi muscle, and finally for movement it participates in contraction, flexes and medially rotates the arm by pulling the humerus towards the clavicle. Now for radio ulnar and elbow and knee joint, looking at the triceps branchi, which is the agonist, the origin is the scapula, the insertion is the muscle fibers are inserted onto olecranon process, and the antagonist is the biceps and brachialis muscles, and the movement is it takes part in retroversion and adduction of the arm. Now looking at hip joint, if we look at the tibialis anterior, we can see that the origin is that it originates at the upper area of the outside surface of the tibia. The insertion is it inserts into the medial conform and first metatarsal bones of the foot, and the antagonist is the plantar flexors, and finally the movement is dorsiflexion and inversion of the ankle. Finally, here's the spine. The agonist is the internal obliques. It originates at the lumbar fascia, the integral ligament and the iliac crest. The insertion is ribs, pectoral line and linea alba. The antagonist is the rectus abdominis, external obliques and transversus abdominis, and finally the movement is contraction, in which it's performed by muscle rotates of the trunk. Now we're going to move on to muscle fibers. There are three main types of muscle fibers. These include slow oxidative muscle fibers, fast oxidative, and fast oxidative glycolytic, which is also known as FOG in short term. These all individually account for different things. Muscle fibers are used in aerobic respiration to produce low energy contractions over a large time and are much slower at fatiguing. We're going to start with slow oxidative fibers. So slow oxidative fibers are used when the muscle has to work for a long period of time, for example, a long distance 800-meter run or marathon. These fibers maximize their ability to produce ATP, chemical energy stores through aerobic metabolism. The fibers contain more mitochondria than glycolytic fibers, which means that there's more ATP produced due to more sites of aerobic respiration. Slow oxidative fibers use aerobic metabolism to produce low power contractions, which can occur over long periods of time and are slow to fatigue. With fast oxidative fibers, they're used when there is not such a high demand for the contractions over a long period of time. They use aerobic metabolism to produce ATP chemical energy stores as well. However, they make higher tension contractions than slow oxidative fibers. They can fatigue quicker than slow oxidative fibers because they are designed for speed, strength, and powerful activities, such as a fast running event such as 400 meters. Now for fog fibers, these are the fast oxidative glycolytic fibers, also known as fast twitch fibers. They are responsible for very rapid and fast contractions. They create very forceful muscle contractions and fatigue quickly. For example, when these fibers will be used is 100-meter sprints. The body will need these fibers, which can contract quickly and powerfully for a short amount of time, and as a result, these fibers fatigue the most quick out of all of them. When we look at the structural characteristics of muscle fibers, we know that fiber diameters range between 28 and 32 micrometers. A muscle that's required for fine control or delicate movements are controlled by motor units and will tend to have small innervation ratios because there isn't a huge demand for contraction and not much power is required. So each motor neuron will be control of a small number of muscle fibers, enabling muscle movement of the entire muscle. Slow twitch fibers are smaller and develop less force than fast twitch fibers. When a larger muscle is needed to contract, such as the bicep muscle in running, the motor unit will have a large innervation ratios in order to connect to a large surface area of muscle and to contract powerfully. Muscles need to respond to a neurochemical response. Capillarization. Capillarization is capillary density, which is the number of capillaries that support nerves to the muscles, which means that there is a higher blood flow and therefore more oxygen can be pumped to the working muscles. Mitochondria produce ATP energy by aerobic respiration, so a large supply of oxygen is helpful. Capillaries transport oxygen and nutrients to muscles and remove waste products. In slow twitch, slow oxidative, the capillary density is high. Then for fast oxidative, the density is medium, and finally for fast glycolytic fibers, the density is low. Myoglobin is a pigment which binds to oxygen, making the fibers red, and the different fibers have different levels of content of this pigment. For example, slow oxidative fibers have high myoglobin content, which results in the redness of these fibers. Fast oxidative fibers have medium content of it, and then fast glycolytic fibers have low concentration, which give these fibers a more white colouring. For mitochondria content, slow oxidative fibers have the highest and fast glycolytic fibers have the lowest content of mitochondria. This is because the slow fibers need to have a higher level of energy because they can be contracting for a much longer period of time, which shows that if they have more mitochondria, they can produce more ATP from aerobic respiration. The fiber's glycolytic capacity varies in content with the different fibers. It is the fiber's capacity to store and then break down glycogen for use as a high-intensity energy source. Slow oxidative fibers have a low content, followed by fast and fast glycolytic fibers, which both have high. Triglyceride is a lipid made of one head of glycerol, followed by 3 tails of fatty acids. Some of their everyday uses in the body is for thermal insulation, protection of organs, and metabolizing water, as well as energy stores, which is why they're used in muscle fibers. The content goes from high to low when they form slow oxidative to high to fast glycolytic.